Good evening. Today I want to take you on a journey through one of the most famous cities on Earth, Paris. When people say the name Paris, they often think of beauty, romance, fashion, art, and lights along the river at night. They imagine elegant streets, cafes, museums, and the Eiffel Tower rising above the skyline. But Paris is much older than all of that. Paris is not just a beautiful city. It is a city that has survived invasions, plagues, revolutions, fires, wars, and massive changes in power. It is a city that has been rebuilt again and again, like history itself leaving marks on stone. In this video, I'm going to tell you the entire history of Paris in a simple and clear way, as if we're walking through time together. And as we move through each era, try to imagine what Paris looked like, what it smelled like, what it sounded like, and what it felt like to live there. So for a moment, let's leave the modern world behind. No cars, no streetlights, no metro, no glass buildings. Only the river, the land, and the first people who lived here long before Paris became Paris. Our story begins more than 2,000 years ago. Before the Romans arrived, the area we now call Paris was home to a Celtic tribe known as the Parisii. They lived near the river Seine because water meant life. The river provided fish, travel routes, and connections to other communities. It also offered safety and a way to trade. If you could stand there back then, you would not see a city. You would see small settlements, wooden structures, and simple boats along the water. Life moved slowly. People depended on seasons and nature. The Seine was not a tourist attraction. It was the center of survival. Then the Romans arrived. In the 1st century BC, Rome expanded across Europe, and the area became part of the Roman world. The Romans built roads, bridges, baths, temples, and public spaces. They called the settlement Lutetia. This was the first time Paris began to resemble a city. Roman engineering changed everything. Streets became organized, stone buildings appeared. There were places where people gathered, where officials worked, and where soldiers marched. Roman Paris was not as large as Rome itself, of course, but it was a real urban center. People spoke Latin, traded goods, and lived within the empire. If you visited Lutetia, you would see Roman baths filled with steam, markets full of food and cloth, and citizens walking along the streets with Roman-style clothing. But empires do not last forever. As the Roman Empire weakened, life in this city changed again. The world became more unstable. Threats increased. Populations moved. The city needed protection. One key place became central, Île de la Cité, the island in the Seine. That island offered natural defense. It was easier to protect than open land. Over time, the city shifted closer to it. You can still feel that history today because Île de la Cité remains the heart of Paris. Now, let's move forward to the early Middle Ages. After Rome's control weakened, the Franks grew stronger. The Franks were Germanic people who built power in this region. One of the most important figures in early French history was Clovis I. In the late 5th century, Clovis made Paris one of his main centers of power. Paris was becoming more than just a settlement. It was becoming a political symbol. This period is important because it shaped the identity of France. Christianity also grew in importance, and Paris became more connected to religious power. Churches developed and religion became part of daily life. But life in medieval Paris was not elegant. It was crowded, dirty, loud, and deeply human. Medieval Paris was full of narrow streets. Many buildings were wooden. Fires were common. Waste and sewage often flowed into the streets. Disease spread easily, yet the city continued to grow because it was important for trade and power. Markets formed, guilds developed, workers organized. Paris became a place of craftsmen, merchants, builders, and students, and education became one of Paris's great strengths. By the 12th and 13th centuries, Paris became one of Europe's intellectual centers. The University of Paris became famous, attracting scholars and students. This helped shape Paris as a city of learning, a reputation it still holds. During this time, one of the most famous buildings in Paris began to rise, Notre Dame Cathedral. Notre Dame was not just a church, it was a statement, a message built in stone that said, "This city matters, faith matters, power matters." Imagine watching Notre Dame being built year after year, generations working on it, stonecutters shaping blocks, wooden scaffolding reaching toward the sky, people looking up with awe. The cathedral represented something eternal in a world that often felt unstable. As Paris grew, kings saw its importance. Paris became a royal center. Castles and fortified walls were built. The city became richer, but also more controlled. Now we move into a darker chapter. In the 14th century, Europe faced disaster. War and plague struck. The Black Death reached Paris. People died in massive numbers. Fear filled the streets. Families were destroyed. Workers vanished. The city, like many others in Europe, suffered deeply. At the same time, France was caught in the 100 Years' War against England. Paris was not always safe. Power shifted. Armies moved. Tension was constant. Yet Paris survived. And by the time we reach the Renaissance period, Paris begins to transform. In the 1500s, France becomes more powerful in Europe. Art and culture develop. Architecture becomes more ambitious. Paris becomes more refined, though it still contains deep poverty and hardship. French kings build and expand palaces. Paris becomes a center of royal influence. But France also faces religious conflict. Catholics and Protestants fought violently, and Paris became a place of tension and political struggle. People were attacked for beliefs, communities were divided, power and faith mixed in dangerous ways. Still, Paris continued to grow not just as a city, but as an idea. Now let's step into the 1600s. Paris expands, more bridges are built, more roads develop, more royal structures rise. The city becomes larger and more populated, but the city is also unequal. The wealthy live in comfort. The poor live crowded in small spaces with limited resources. Food shortages happen, work is unstable, and anger builds slowly. This brings us closer to the most famous turning point in Paris history, the French Revolution. To understand the French Revolution, you need to imagine Paris in the late 1700s. The city is alive, crowded, full of rumors and frustration. People talk about taxes, hunger, corruption, royal waste, the idea that life is unfair. Paris was the center of revolutionary energy. It had thinkers, writers, speakers, and crowds who could gather quickly. In Paris, ideas became action. In 1789, everything changed. The storming of the Bastille became a symbol of rebellion. The Bastille was a prison, but in people's minds, it represented royal control and fear. When the crowd attacked it, it felt like the old world cracking. Soon, Paris was no longer just a city. It was the engine of revolution. The streets filled with political debate. People formed groups. Newspapers spread ideas. Speeches happened in public spaces. Fear and excitement mixed together, and then violence came. People were executed. The guillotine became a terrifying symbol of justice and terror. Paris entered a period where power could shift overnight. Anyone could be accused. Anyone could fall. It was not only politics, it was survival. But the revolution did something permanent. It changed the idea of France. After the chaos, a new figure rises, Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon emerges as a strong leader and brings order, but also ambition. Under Napoleon, Paris continues to develop as a capital of power. France expands through war. Paris becomes the heart of an empire. Napoleon builds monuments and reshapes the city's identity. Even today, Paris holds signs of his influence. But again, power changes. Napoleon falls, kings return, revolutions return. Paris in the 1800s becomes a city that repeatedly rises and breaks. It becomes a symbol of political struggle. Now we reach one of the most important transformations of Paris. In the mid-1800s, Paris was still filled with medieval streets. Many areas were crowded and unhealthy. Disease spread. Streets were narrow. Movement was difficult. Then came a major redesign. Under Emperor Napoleon III, a man named Georges Eugène Haussmann was given control to rebuild Paris. This is what created the Paris many people recognize today. Haussmann built wide boulevards. He created open spaces. He improved water systems and sewage. He shaped the city into something modern. But this modernization had a cost. Many poor neighborhoods were destroyed. People were forced to move. The city became more elegant, but also more controlled. Some historians argue the wide streets were also designed to prevent revolts, making it easier for soldiers to move and harder for people to build barricades. So Paris became beautiful, but also strategic. Now let's move into the late 1800s. This was a time of invention and culture. Paris became a world center of art, music, and innovation. It became the place where painters, writers, and designers created new styles. And in 1889, Paris built one of its most famous symbols, the Eiffel Tower. At first, many people hated it. Some thought it was ugly. Some thought it ruined the skyline. But it became a global icon. The Eiffel Tower represented modern engineering and the future. Now Paris enters the 20th century. And the 20th century brings war. World War I impacted France deeply. Paris was threatened, but it remained standing. The war brought grief, loss, and fear. After the war, Paris became a place of recovery and culture again. The 1920s in Paris were famous for artistic life. Writers and artists moved there. The city felt alive. But a darker war was coming, World War II. In 1940, German forces occupied Paris. This is one of the most painful chapters in Paris history. The city lived under occupation. Freedom was limited. People faced shortages. Fear was everywhere. Some resisted. Some cooperated. Many simply tried to survive. Paris was later liberated in 1944. The liberation was celebrated as a powerful moment of victory and hope. After World War II, Paris rebuilt and modernized further. The city became a symbol of European identity, culture, and tourism. Now, if you look at Paris today, you see a city layered with time, Roman history beneath streets, medieval churches, royal palaces, revolutionary landmarks, Haussmann boulevards, modern buildings. Paris is not one city. It is many cities stacked on top of each other. And that is what makes it so powerful. Because Paris is not just the city of romance. It is the city of survival. It has been invaded, rebuilt, and transformed. It has experienced greatness and suffering. It has produced art and violence, beauty and fear. So when you walk along the Seine today, you are not just looking at a river in a modern city. You are standing beside thousands of years of human life. People once fished here to survive. Roman citizens once walked nearby. Medieval workers built cathedrals near these waters. Revolutionary crowds marched through nearby streets. Soldiers once patrolled under occupation. All of it happened here. That is the entire history of Paris. Not as a perfect story, but as a real story. A story of change. And if Paris teaches us anything, it is this. Cities are living things. They carry memory, they carry pain, they carry hope. And even when the world changes completely, the soul of a place can remain. Paris has always been more than stone and streets. It has been a symbol of human life, human struggle, and human imagination. Thank you for watching and for taking this journey with me through the entire history of Paris. And if you enjoyed this story, I hope you'll join me again next time because history is not only behind us, it is still alive, waiting to be seen.